Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Supporting Your Child with Writing Key Stage 1 Parental Engagement meeting. This meeting will be covering three very important areas: the components of writing, the national curriculum, and how to support your child. So the components of writing that we look at in Key Stage 1 are transcription, which is spelling and handwriting, composition, which is articulating ideas and structuring them in speech and writing, and the final one is vocabulary, grammar, and punctuation. So I'm going to break down the curriculum now into Year 1 and Year 2 and talk to you a bit more about what the children should be able to do in each year. So for Year 1 and transcription, the children should be taught to spell words containing the 40+ phonemes. They should be able to spell some common exception words, the days of the week, name the letters of the alphabet in order, and use letter names to distinguish between alternative spellings of the same sound. Children should be able to add some prefixes and suffixes to words and use the spelling rule for adding S or ES to the end of a root word to make a plural. Children should also be able to use ING, ED, ER, and EST where no change is needed in the spelling of the word. For example, helping, the root word is help, and the suffix ing is added, so there is no need to change the spelling of the root word. And finally, they should be able to write simple sentences dictated by the teacher from memory. In terms of handwriting, in Year 1, the children should be taught to sit correctly at a table, holding a pencil comfortably and correctly. They should be able to form the lowercase letters in the correct direction, starting and finishing in the right place. Children should also be able to form capital letters and the digits 0 to 9. In Year 1, children should understand which letters belong to which family. So that means that the letters that are formed in similar ways. Okay, if I continue now with the Year 1 curriculum, for composition, children should be taught to write sentences by saying out loud what they are going to write about. And this they also do in their phonics lessons. They should be able to compose a sentence orally before they write it down. And children should be able to sequence their sentences to form short narratives. It's important in Year 1 that children begin to reread what they have written to check that their writing makes sense. And they should be able to discuss what they have written with the teacher or other pupils around them. Year 1 children should be able to read their writing clearly aloud to be heard by their peers and the teacher. Or if you're working at home, of course, they should be given opportunities to read to you. For vocabulary, grammar, and punctuation, Year 1 pupils should be taught and should be able to leave spaces between words. When joining words and clauses, the children should be able to use and. With regards to punctuation, Year 1 pupils should be able to use capital letters, full stops, question marks, and exclamation marks. And finally, they should be able to use capital letters for the names of people, places, days of the week, and the personal pronoun I. Now, as I move on to the Year 2 curriculum, you may notice that some of the things are quite similar, which they are. And in year 2, they build on the skills that they develop in year 1. Sorry, and I'll talk to you a little bit more about what I mean by that in a moment. So in year 2 for transcription, children should be taught to spell by segmenting spoken words into phonemes and represent these by graphemes, spelling many correctly. Now, it doesn't say spelling all of them correctly, but the children should be able to make phonetically plausible attempts at words, on many occasions choosing the right way to spell a sound. Year 2 children should be taught to learn new ways of spelling phonemes for which one or more spellings are already known, and to learn some words with each spelling. They should learn to spell more common exception words, and this will include the year 1 common exception words as well. In year 2, children should be learning to spell more words with contracted forms using the apostrophe in the correct place. They should also be able to use an apostrophe to show possession. Children should be able to distinguish between homophones and near homophones, so words that sound the same that are spelt differently. For example, here, as in the location, and here, the verb that we do with our ears. In year 2, children should be able to add suffixes to spell longer words. And with regards to writing, in year 1, children should be able to form lowercase letters of the correct size. And in year 2, it says they should be able to do this and ensure that the size is relative to one another. So all of their lowercase letters should be of a similar size. In year 2, children should begin to use some of the diagonal and horizontal strokes to join their letters, and to understand that sometimes letters are best left unjoined. Children should also write capital letters and digits of the correct size, orientation, and relationship to one another, and lowercase letters. So what this means is that when their capital letters are written, they should be bigger, excuse me, than the lowercase letters. And children should use spacing between words that reflects the size of the letters. So the spaces shouldn't be too big or too small. As we continue with the year 2 curriculum, children should be taught to develop positive attitudes and stamina for writing. So they should be able to write for longer periods of time. And they can do this by writing about different things. The first thing children should be writing about is narratives about their own personal experiences and the experiences of other people. Now, these can be real people or fictional people, but they should be taught to write narratives. Children should also write about real events, poetry, and they should learn to write for different purposes, so to persuade, for example. Children should also, as they do in year 1, say out loud what they are going to write about, but they should also be able to plan now in more detail. Okay, and this can include writing down ideas or keywords, including new vocabulary. Children should be able to encapsulate what they want to say sentence by sentence. So they should be clear and concise and get their point or their idea across concisely without too much additional writing in there. Children should be able to make simple additions to their own writing and evaluate their own writing with the teacher, other pupils, or other adults. Year 2 children should be able to reread and check that their writing makes sense, just like in year 1, but also they should learn to proofread to check for errors in spelling, grammar, and punctuation in their own writing. In year 1, as we mentioned previously, children should be able to read their writing aloud clearly. In year 2, this should be done, and it should be done with intonation to help make meaning even clearer. When we move on to vocabulary, grammar, and punctuation, children should be taught to use sentences with different forms. And these are statements, questions, exclamations, and commands. So in year 1, they should be punctuating their sentences with exclamation marks, question marks, and full stops. But in year 2, they need to extend this to writing sentences with different forms. Pupils should be able to use expounded noun phrases to describe and specify. And they should do this by using ambitious vocabulary to make their writing more interesting for the reader. Children should be able to use the present and past tense correctly and consistently. So if they are starting a piece of work in the past tense, it should stay in the past tense all the way through that piece of writing. Children should also learn to use subordination with the conjunctions when, if, that, or because, and also coordination, so using the conjunctions or, and, or but. Okay, now in year 2, the children are assessed for their SATs. Now this year it's a little bit different because there aren't any SATs, but there will still be teacher assessment. So in English, there are 3 standards that the children are able to meet. And within each standard, there are a number of statements where the children are judged. Teachers can use their discretion to ensure that on occasion, a particular weakness does not prevent an accurate judgment being made of a pupil's overall attainment. And this only applies to writing. When I say a particular weakness, it could relate to part or the whole of a statement, as long as there is a good reason to judge that it would prevent that statement being met. So the framework is broken down into 3 areas. The first is working towards the expected standard. And this includes these statements. Okay, the pupil can write sentences that are sequenced to form a short narrative. Demarcate some sentences with capital letters and full stops. Segment spoken words into phonemes and represent these using graphemes, spelling some words correctly and making plausible attempts at others. Spell some common exception words. Form lowercase letters in the correct direction, starting and finishing in the right place. Form letters of the correct size relative to one another in some of their writing, and use spacing between the words. So the key phrasing here is that the pupil can do it sometimes in some sentences. So a child would not be, or a child wouldn't, sorry, I'm trying to work out how to word this properly. As long as a child is doing it sometimes, even if it's not in all of the sentences, the child would still meet the working towards standard. If we look at the wording within the expected standard, you'll see the difference. So pupils should be able to write simple, coherent narratives about personal experiences, write about real events, recording them simply and clearly. And this is where the wording comes in really important. So it says, demarcate most sentences. So we've gone from some sentences to most sentences. And they should use question marks correctly when required. Again, the word most comes up in our next statement, to use present and past tense mostly correctly and consistently. So it doesn't have to be all of the time, but it should be most of the time. It says again that children should be able to segment spoken words and represent them using graphemes, spelling many of the words. So again, we've gone from some to many. They should be able to spell many common exception words and use spacing between words that reflects the size of the letters. So if your child has larger handwriting, the spaces between those words should reflect the size of the letters. As we move into the final area of the framework, working at greater depth, the children should be able to write effectively and coherently for different purposes, drawing on their reading to inform the vocabulary and the grammar of their writing. They should be able to make additions, revisions, and proofreading corrections to their own writing independently. Children should be able to use the punctuation taught at Key Stage 1 mostly correctly, so on most occasions. And they should be able to spell most common exception words. Also at greater depth, the children should be joining their words more consistently, so using the diagonal and horizontal strokes needed to join some letters. Now, this framework isn't a best fit framework. So the children need to be able to meet all of the statements in the particular area to be able to be judged at that level. So to be judged at greater depth, the children need to be able to do everything at working towards, everything at working at, and everything within the greater depth statements, with the exception, as I mentioned previously, of a particular area of weakness for some children. Okay. So how can you help support your child at home? Well, here are some ways that you can do that. Speaking and listening is essential. Talking with your child regularly about their day or their interests will encourage them to build confidence with language and communicating. As you know, children pick up a lot through what they hear. So listening to you speak will allow your child to pick up on vocabulary and grammar. They also pick up language skills through what they are watching on their screens. Another way to help support your child is with the writing itself, okay? And fine motor skills are incredibly important. Using pencils, paintbrushes, crayons, and other materials to form lines, circles, and other shapes on a page will help children to use pencils properly and support their writing. Another way you can support your child with their writing is to encourage them to use objects or dress up things that they have at home to act out a story before writing it down. And this will help them to internalize the story and become very familiar with it, which will allow them to add some creativity to their writing. Now, I've spoken a little bit about fine motor skills, and this is essential for helping children to write. And here are some of the things that the children should be able to do, and it tells you the age. Now, these are pre-writing expectations. So the children should be able to do all of these things before they are writing. So they should be able to make vertical lines, horizontal lines, a circle shape, a cross shape, a square shape, left and right diagonal lines, an X shape and a triangle shape. Now, all of these things will help to develop fine motor skills. And there are lots of different activities that you can do. For example, threading beads onto a string will help to develop that. Moving things through small spaces can help to develop this. And there are lots of ways that this can be done. Now, very briefly, before I end this session, I'm just going to show you an example of what writing at the expected standard at the end of Key Stage 1 should look like. Okay. So this is an example of work that has been judged to meet the standards at the end of Key Stage 1. And this was part of a topic based on The Story Machine by Tom McLaughlin. The children had heard and discussed the story before rewriting it. And this piece of writing was done by a child named Kim, and it was self-reviewed. Now you can see in the key that those 3 areas that we spoke about in both Year 1 and Year 2 are identified. So we've got composition, grammar and punctuation, and transcription. So you can see here that not every word is spelt correctly, okay? Board is spelt bode. We've got some incorrect use of capital letters here, but capital letters and full stops are used correctly elsewhere. Okay, so again, it's looking back at the wording of those statements. The pupil has used the idea of the unusual machine and made it their own, including finding the machine in the attic and putting all the parts together. As in the original story, something goes wrong. So these children have learnt the story and understood it, and they've used that to create their own piece of writing. Okay, now you can see that this child has also used coordinating conjunctions. So they've used and to join 2 main clauses. You can also see there's some crossing out. So this child has looked back through their work and has spotted that they've made some errors, and they've crossed them out and corrected them. So for example, here, they've written took and they've used CK for the K sound. And upon revision, they've corrected it and they've used the correct spelling of the word. Further up in that sentence, the child has used the word the multiple times. And upon revision, they've identified that they've done that and they've crossed it out so that the sentence makes more sense. You can also see that this child demonstrates an understanding of sentences and capital letters and full stops, where he has, or she has, sorry, identified that she's used a lowercase f after a full stop, but then changed it when they've revised it. Okay, the past tense here also helps to establish the relationship between the events. So rather than just using soon he opened, they've said soon he had opened. Okay, so they show a very good understanding of grammar there. There are other examples, and this is just one piece, at the expected standard in Year 2. These can be found on the government website, but I will also have them uploaded to the school website so that you can view them if you would like to. I'm going to end the meeting now, but thank you for listening and taking the time to see how you can support your child with their writing in Key Stage 1. Thank you.